The last straw. Humanity had always prided itself on diplomacy, patience, and the belief that collaboration was the key to a lasting galactic peace. For centuries, Earth's representatives had worked tirelessly within the Federation, an intergalactic union of species that spanned across thousands of light years. The Federation was a vast, complex organization, composed of peaceful races, warlike factions, and everything in between. And yet, in all those years of service, humanity had remained at the periphery, constantly reminded that they were small, young, and relatively insignificant in the grand cosmic scheme. It was a status they had quietly accepted, until now. President Maria Carson sat at the long table, her hands folded neatly in front of her. The chamber was silent except for the low hum of energy fields in the walls, the faint electronic pulse of an interstellar warship's shields. It was one of those rare occasions when the entire Federation Council had convened in person, an urgent matter of galactic security forcing them to gather. But for humanity, the urgency had begun to feel all too familiar. They were always called to these meetings, yet their voice seemed to carry no weight, their concerns often brushed aside. Across the table, the Krakk representative, a tall, broad-shouldered alien with thick, scaly skin that shimmered in the soft lights, loomed like a predator. Krakk, the Krakk ambassador, had long been a thorn in humanity's side. His race was known for its brutish strength and overwhelming aggression, and Krakk's disdain for humans had always been palpable. His species viewed themselves as the natural rulers of the galaxy, and the Federation was merely a formality to them, a way to establish dominance while claiming to abide by diplomatic niceties. Krakk's deep voice broke the silence. It is clear that the human contribution to the Federation has been overstated. You claim to have valuable resources, but it is time the Krakk took what is rightfully ours. You are weak. You always have been. President Carson felt a pang of anger rise within her chest. She had heard insults like this many times before. The Krakk had long harassed humanity for its technology, its resources, and its strategic location in the galaxy. The Krakk had pushed humanity's patience, testing the limits of their resolve. But this latest statement felt like the breaking point. It wasn't just the arrogance, it was the disrespect, the contempt with which Krakk spoke. "We will not allow your species to exploit Earth any longer," Carson said, her voice calm, but her words cutting through the tension like a knife. Krakk sneered. "Your Earth, your planet is nothing but a resource waiting to be harvested. There is no place for sentimental alliances in the Federation. You should be grateful that we have not taken your world by force already." The room seemed to freeze, the weight of Krakk's words settling in like a poisonous cloud. Some of the other representatives exchanged uneasy glances, but none spoke out. The other species had always been content to let humanity bear the burden of diplomacy, to settle disputes through negotiation and compromise. But the Krakk had always been an exception, pushing humanity further and further into submission. But today was different. Carson stood slowly, the sharp click of her heels echoing off the polished floor. "I've heard enough." There was a murmur in the chamber, a ripple of surprise. The human president, known for her calm demeanor, had never once raised her voice in such a direct confrontation. But now, with her back straight and her eyes locked on Krakk, Carson felt something snap within her. She had spent years negotiating, building alliances, walking the fine line between compromise and pride. She had given everything to ensure peace. Humanity's commitment to diplomacy had been unyielding. But Krakk's words had been the final insult. "We've tolerated your threats, your demands, your insults," Carson continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "But you've made a grave mistake. Earth is not a resource. It is our home, and humanity will not stand by and let you or anyone else take it from us. Not anymore." Krakk's expression darkened. "You would dare." "Yes," Carson interjected. "We dare, and we will no longer be the Federation's doormat." The silence in the room was deafening. The other representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The virulence, peaceful and diplomatic, exchanged nervous glances. The Veneri, towering insectoids with a deep sense of honor, seemed on edge. The Nyxians, the most powerful and fearsome species in the galaxy, sat stoically, their eyes hidden behind their black visors. No one spoke. It was clear that the delicate balance of power had just tipped. Carson turned to face the council. Humanity has contributed more to the Federation than any of you care to admit. We have given, sacrificed, and fought for this alliance. But today, that ends. If the Krakk, or any other species, think they can simply take what is ours, then we will show you what humanity is capable of. You want to test us? Fine. But be warned, the moment you underestimate us will be your last. With that, she turned and walked out of the room, her voice carrying one final command. Prepare our forces. We are done asking for respect. Outside the council chamber, President Carson paused in the hallway. She could feel the weight of her words. There was no turning back now. Humanity's patience had officially snapped. And from this moment on, the Federation would remember the moment Earth decided to stop being the meek servant of the stars. Humanity would fight for its place in the galaxy, not with submission, but with force. And no species would ever forget it. The reckoning. The hum of the communication console was a constant presence in the war room as President Maria Carson stood at the center of the large, circular table. The map projected before her flickered with light as Earth's defense grid expanded across the display, showing Earth's orbit, key defense stations, and the location of Allied ships. The space around her was filled with military personnel, strategists, and key advisors who, until recently, had hoped that diplomacy would keep Earth safe. But now, that hope seemed distant, replaced by a resolve that burned brighter with each passing second. We're officially in a state of war, Captain Lydia Trent, standing at Carson's side, said with a faint voice. Her eyes were fixed on the tactical display, her arms crossed over her chest as she absorbed the scope of what had just begun. Carson nodded. Her expression was steely. And they won't stop. The Krakk and their allies will test every limit. We need to show them that humanity isn't to be trifled with. Lydia's gaze shifted to the massive star map in front of them. She could see the markers representing Krakk ships now moving toward Earth's orbit. There was no question about it. The Krakk had miscalculated. And now, humanity would make them pay for it. President Carson's voice echoed through the room, breaking the silence that had settled after her previous declaration. Let's not underestimate their arrogance. But we have something they don't. The will to fight for our home. It's time we show them that we are not weak, not just in diplomacy, but in battle. Understood, said Lieutenant Alex Rayner, a young officer who had been with the military since the early days of the Federation. His voice was steady, though the weight of the moment hung heavily in the air. We're ready to deploy. Carson's eyes shifted to the screen. On the map, she could see the approaching Krakk fleet, their ships circling Earth in a slow, deliberate manner. The Krakk were nothing if not methodical, aggressive, but tactical in their approach. They hadn't yet launched an attack, but their proximity was a clear sign of their intent. Captain Trent, Carson said, her eyes narrowing, we need to hit them first. We can't afford to let them get the upper hand. They'll think we're bluffing, but I want them to know that Earth isn't afraid of war. Lydia Trent gave a small nod. I've already made arrangements for a surprise strike. We've been monitoring their fleet movements for months now. I'll ensure we catch them off guard. Lydia turned to her crew, their faces already hardened with determination. The plan was simple. Humanity's forces, largely underestimated by the Federation, had secretly been amassing advanced technology and combat tactics, all while keeping their full capabilities hidden from the galaxy's other species. The Federation, in its arrogance, assumed that Earth's military might was still based on outdated technology. But humanity had spent years building new weapons, developing new defense strategies, and enhancing their fleet's capabilities. The Krakk wouldn't know what hit them. As the ships prepared for launch, Carson and Lydia stood side by side, watching the tactical feed from the ships in Earth's outer atmosphere. With each passing moment, the Krakk fleet drew closer. But just as they were within range, Lydia gave the order to strike. Launch the interceptors, she commanded. The launch sequence was swift. 100 advanced fighters, sleek, high-tech ships designed for stealth and rapid response, blazed out of Earth's atmosphere, their engines glowing a fiery red as they streaked toward the Krakk fleet. In the vacuum of space, there would be silent, lethal predators, ready to show the Krakk the true power of humanity's military. The first shots were fired. The Krakk ships, caught off guard by the sudden assault, retaliated with explosive force. But they were not prepared for the human technology now bearing down on them. The fighters outmaneuvered their largest ships, dodging massive plasma blasts and returning fire with precision. Earth's fleet, carefully positioned in strategic sectors around the planet, joined the fray. They had the advantage of surprise, and they were using it to full effect. In the command center, the tactical display exploded with activity. Missiles from the human fighters tore into the Krakk ships, while larger capital ships positioned themselves for direct confrontation. The Krakk ships, though larger and more heavily armed, struggled to respond to the unexpected ferocity of the human fleet. "Status report," Carson demanded, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline that rushed through her veins. "Krakk fleet is scrambling," said one of the officers, his fingers flying across the console. "Their outer defenses are compromised. They weren't expecting this level of force." "Good," Carson said, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Keep the pressure on them. We'll give them no time to recover." As the battle raged on, Lydia Trent watched from the command deck of her flagship, the Invincible. The sight of Krakk ships crumbling under the human assault was a testament to the potential that humanity had kept hidden. She had always known that the Federation had underestimated Earth. But this was no longer a matter of proving their worth. This was about survival. This was about sending a message to every species that had ever doubted humanity's strength. Back on Earth, the world's leaders had made their decision. They would not be pawns in the Federation's games any longer. The Krakk had pushed them too far. And now, humanity would show them what it meant to threaten a species that had the will to fight for everything it held dear. The battle was far from over, but humanity had already made one thing clear. The Federation's complacency was over. The moment humanity's patience snapped had come, and no one would ever forget it. The fury of Earth. The chaos of battle raged through space like a thunderstorm of steel and fire. Krakk warships burned in the void, their once imposing hulls crumbling under the assault of humanity's hidden weaponry. On the ground, military forces across the planet scrambled to prepare for what was sure to come next, an escalation. For the first time in centuries, Earth was no longer simply a member of the Federation, meekly negotiating for its survival. Now, it was at war. Humanity's fury had been unleashed, and there was no turning back. Inside the war room, President Maria Carson stood at the center, her eyes locked on the tactical map. The Krakk fleet was retreating, but the damage had been done. They had underestimated humanity's response, but they were regrouping, and they would not forget this humiliation. "Report," Carson said, her voice calm but sharp. "Krakk forces have been pushed back into deep space," Lieutenant Alex Rayner said, his fingers dancing across the console. "Our interceptors have broken their outer defense lines. We've lost 12 fighters, but their fleet is severely compromised. The remaining Krakk ships are in disarray, attempting to reorganize." "Good," Carson said, nodding slightly. "But this won't be over until we take full control of their assets. I want us to hit them while they are vulnerable." "Agreed." Captain Lydia Trent spoke up, her tone unwavering. "They'll be regrouping. But this is the perfect time to launch a full-scale offensive. If we hit their supply lines, they'll have nowhere to fall back to. We have the element of surprise, and we need to capitalize on it." Carson glanced at the war map, her mind already working through the logistics of the next phase. "I want all available ships deployed. We're going to force them to surrender or face complete annihilation." But it wasn't just the Krakk who posed a threat anymore. The Federation, though initially stunned by humanity's unexpected strike, was beginning to react. Diplomatic channels buzzed with frantic communications, and Carson knew that Earth's position had suddenly become precarious. There were whispers of the Nyxians, an ancient and fearsome race whose reputation for ruthlessness had earned them the title of the Federation's enforcers. The Nyxians were fast approaching, and their arrival would change the dynamic of the war. In orbit, the Invincible, Captain Lydia Trent's flagship, sliced through space at breakneck speed, its sleek form a testament to humanity's newfound technological prowess. As the Krakk ships regrouped, the human fleet had formed a perimeter, and it was within that defensive ring that Lydia and her crew were preparing to launch the next wave. "Captain, we have incoming communications from the Federation," her communications officer said, a note of caution in his voice. "They want to negotiate a ceasefire. The Virulins and the Neri are pressing for peace talks." Lydia's eyes narrowed. "Tell them we're not interested." "Are you sure about that, Captain?" the officer asked, his hands hovering over the console. "The Nyxians are en route, and—" "I said no," Lydia interrupted, her voice firm. "Humanity's patience has run out. If they want peace, they'll have to learn that respect is earned, not given." The officer nodded, his fingers moving quickly to shut down the incoming communication. Lydia's decision was final. Humanity had already made its stance clear, and there would be no backing down now. Down on Earth, the public's reaction to the conflict was mixed. While many rallied behind their government, proud of humanity's ability to stand its ground, others were filled with fear. The war had escalated quickly, and it was no longer a matter of protecting Earth. It was a matter of survival. The Krakk had made a powerful enemy, and the Federation's larger, more powerful races were beginning to question whether humanity was truly capable of holding its own. In the midst of this, President Carson stood before the public, her face resolute and composed as she addressed the world for the first time since the war had begun. The message she gave was one of unity, strength, and unyielding determination. "Humanity will not back down," she said, her voice resonating through every screen across Earth. "We are not just fighting for our planet. We are fighting for every human being in the Federation who has been overlooked, dismissed, and oppressed. We will not be silenced. We will not be trampled. We will fight, and we will win." Her words were met with cheers from some, but the underlying tension in her voice made it clear that this was only the beginning. The Federation was not a single entity. It was a coalition of species, each with its own agenda and its own hidden motives. Humanity had now made itself an enemy of those who had once seemed like allies. But President Carson was unflinching. She knew the stakes. Back in space, the human fleet had just completed its strike on the Krakk's primary supply depot, a vital resource hub deep within the asteroid belt. The explosions were visible even from Earth, a massive flash of light against the dark backdrop of the cosmos. The Krakk were reeling, but as they staggered, humanity pressed on. As Lydia's flagship cruised through the darkened space, the comms officer called out, his voice filled with apprehension. "Captain, we have a new signal. Large ships, multiple signatures. They are Nyxian." Lydia's expression hardened. The Nyxians had arrived, and with them came a new level of danger. The Federation had sent them to restore order, to remind humanity who was truly in charge. "We're about to find out if humanity can really stand against the galaxy's might," Lydia muttered, her eyes locked on the incoming ships. "All hands, brace for impact. This is where the real fight begins." And as the Nyxian fleet descended upon them, humanity stood firm. They had drawn a line in the sand, and there would be no retreat. Humanity's final stand. The dark void of space trembled with the heavy presence of the Nyxian fleet. Their ships, massive and imposing, glided silently toward Earth, their dark metallic hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. The Nyxians were a race known for their brutality, the merciless conquests across the galaxy, a warning to any who dared defy the Federation's status quo. Their arrival in Earth's orbit signified the end of any hope for peaceful negotiation, the beginning of a battle that would either break humanity or solidify its place in the cosmos. On board the Invincible, Captain Lydia Trent paced the command deck, her hands clasped behind her back. The tension in the air was palpable. Her crew was tense, but resolute. The past few days had been an unrelenting series of successes, pushing the Krakk back and breaking their defenses. But now, with the Nyxians arriving, everything changed. "Captain, the Nyxian fleet is within range," her communications officer reported, his voice edged with unease. "They are charging their weapons." Lydia nodded, her expression hardening. The Nyxians weren't here to negotiate. They were here to end this. "How much time do we have?" she asked, her voice calm, even though her heart raced in anticipation. 10 minutes, at most, the officer replied. Prepare the fleet for immediate engagement, Lydia ordered, her voice firm. This is it, people. No more backing down. We stand and fight. We show the Federation that humanity will not be bent to anyone's will. Down on Earth, President Maria Carson stood before a massive screen in the command center, her eyes scanning the latest reports. The Nyxian fleet was a formidable force, highly advanced and heavily armed. Humanity had just begun to fully realize the extent of what they were up against. But Carson's resolve was unshaken. She had known this day might come. The Federation had pushed Earth to the brink, but the people of Earth were no longer the meek diplomats they had once been. Said General Markham, a grizzled officer at her side. We're ready for the final assault. The Nyxians are a tactical nightmare, but they are not invincible. We've been preparing for this for decades. Carson turned to him, her eyes sharp. We have one shot at this. Make it count. Back in space, Lydia watched as the Nyxian ships formed a battle line. Their weapons began to power up, their energy signatures flaring as they prepared to launch an attack. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated beneath her feet, and the crew moved with a quiet urgency. The time for hesitation was over. Launch all interceptors, Lydia ordered. We hit them with everything we've got. Full engagement. The human fleet, already battle-tested and hungry for a fight, surged forward. Ships moved as one, coordinated in perfect unison. The Invincible led the charge, its weapons primed and ready. Fighters launched in waves, darting through space with deadly precision, weaving between the incoming Nyxian fire. The soundless void of space was shattered by the explosive blasts of energy weapons, streaking across the dark expanse in brilliant flashes of light. The Nyxian fleet retaliated with brutal efficiency. Massive energy beams lanced out, striking the human ships with terrifying force. The Invincible shuddered as an energy bolt clipped the starboard side, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Lydia gritted her teeth but didn't flinch. Damage report, she barked. Shields holding at 70%. Captain, her chief engineer responded. Hull integrity at 90%. We're still in the fight. Lydia nodded, her hand tightening around the armrest of her chair. Stay in formation. Return fire. This is our home, and we're not letting them take it. The battle intensified as the Nyxians pressed their advantage. Their ships were bigger, their weapons more destructive, and their tactics ruthless. But humanity was different. It wasn't just about firepower, it was about survival. It was about standing firm against overwhelming odds, not bowing down when pushed to the brink. Humanity was fighting for Earth, for everything they had built, and for the future of every human alive. Captain, incoming, the tactical officer shouted. A massive Nyxian dreadnought loomed into view, its weapon systems fully charged. A bright beam of energy shot from its core, streaking toward the Invincible. It would be a direct hit. Brace for impact, Lydia yelled, throwing herself into the safety harness as the ship shuddered violently. The blast hit, and the entire ship rocked, alarms blaring as the hull groaned under the pressure. We're still here, Lydia muttered through gritted teeth. Keep fighting. With the Nyxian dreadnought closing in, the human fleet regrouped and launched their final offensive. This time, it was not just about precision strikes. It was an all-out assault. Fighter squads swarmed the Nyxian ships like a swarm of bees, relentlessly hammering their targets. Humanity's tactical ingenuity, honed through years of preparation, began to show its worth. The Invincible dove into the fray, dodging another barrage of Nyxian fire. Lydia's mind raced as she scanned the battlefield. The Federation had underestimated them, and now the Nyxians were paying the price for it. Target their engines, Lydia ordered. Take out their mobility. We can win this, but we need to cripple their fleet first. The command echoed through the crew, and the human fleet shifted, focusing on the Nyxian dreadnought's weak spots. In a coordinated strike, human ships fired precision missiles at the Nyxian ship's engine core, igniting a massive explosion that sent shockwaves through the battle. The dreadnought staggered, its shields flickering as it lost its ability to maneuver. We've got them, shouted the tactical officer. Lydia grinned, But the battle wasn't over yet. The Nyxians were not giving up without a fight. However, the tides had turned. As the Nyxian flagship faltered, the remaining Nyxian ships began to pull back, their retreat signaling the end of the battle. "We did it," Lydia whispered under her breath. The human fleet had held its ground. Back on Earth, President Carson stood tall before the screen, watching the reports come in. The Nyxian fleet had retreated, their dominance shattered by humanity's sheer will to survive. Earth had been pushed to the brink, but humanity had shown its strength. The Federation would remember this day. No species would ever forget the moment humanity's patience finally snapped.